The summer we became real. Chapter 1. The Last Bell. The final bell of junior year rang like a war cry through the halls of Maplewood High. For most people, it meant freedom. For me, it sounded like a countdown. The clang ricocheted off lockers, sneakers squeaked, and 1,000 voices erupted into chaos. Papers fluttered into the air like confetti, as if the entire building had been holding its breath for 9 months and was finally exhaling. I stuffed my half-broken notebook into a backpack covered in fading band stickers and turned to look at the faces around me. Everyone looked lighter, faster, like the weight of school had just dissolved. But under my skin, something still pressed down. "Alex, you coming or what?" I looked up to see Maya leaning against the locker next to mine, her curly hair spilling down her shoulders, a half-eaten lollipop hanging from her lips. She was everything I wasn't: bold, loud, sure of herself in a way that made people stop and listen. "Yeah," I muttered, slinging my bag over my shoulder. Maya grinned. "Then let's get out of here before Mrs. Klein catches us for some last-day cleanup duty." We stepped into the golden afternoon light that poured across the cracked asphalt of the school parking lot. The smell of hot tar and cut grass wrapped around us. Summer had officially begun. Maya lit a cigarette. She never smoked more than half of one. Always said she liked the way it made her look like someone in a movie. "So," she said, blowing out smoke that twisted into the Sunday, "you still planning to waste your summer working at the diner?" "It's not a waste," I said defensively. "I need the money." She rolled her eyes. "You've needed money since freshman year. You need a life." The truth was, I didn't really know what I needed. My mom's voice echoed in my head: "Save for college. Don't screw this up. Be better than me." But all I could think about was the way everything felt small lately. Maplewood, my room, my life. Maya reached into her tote bag and pulled out a folded flyer. "Then come to the lake party tonight. Everyone's going, even that brooding artist guy you pretend not to stare at in art class." I snorted. "You mean Ethan?" She smirked. "So you admit it." I didn't. Not out loud. That night, the air was thick with summer. The moon hung low over the lake, painting the water silver. Music thumped from someone's car speakers, echoing off the trees. The party was already in full swing: red cups, laughter, the smell of cheap beer and smoke. Maya disappeared within minutes, swallowed by a crowd of people who all seemed to know where they belonged. I lingered by the dock, my sneakers half covered in sand, wondering why I'd come. Then I saw him, Ethan Cole, the boy who sat 2 rows behind me in English, who never raised his hand but always looked like he was carrying a storm behind his eyes. His dark hair was wet, curling at the edges, and he was sketching something in a notebook by the water. Who sketches at a party? "Hey," I said, surprising myself. He looked up slowly, as if surfacing from a dream. His eyes caught the moonlight gray, almost translucent. "Hey, what are you doing?" "Drawing," he said simply, holding up the notebook. It was the lake, but not like I saw it. His drawing was alive, rippling with motion. The reflection of the stars looked like they were breathing. "It's beautiful," I said before I could stop myself. "Thanks." He paused. "You're Alex, right?" Hearing him say my name sent a weird warmth through me. We talked for what felt like hours. About everything and nothing: music, how fake people acted in school, how he wanted to leave Maplewood the second he graduated. I didn't tell him that I wanted to, too. I didn't tell him that I'd never said that out loud before. At one point, he took a small rock and skipped it across the lake. "You ever think this town's like that?" he asked. You throw yourself out there, hoping you'll make it past the surface, but you always sink. And ape Dana. I didn't answer, but I understood. The night wind grew colder. People started leaving, headlights cutting through the trees. Maya stumbled over, tipsy and laughing, holding someone else's hoodie. "Come on," she said. "We're crashing at my place." I looked at Ethan. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that meant he saw more than he said. "See you around, Alex." I nodded, my heart thudding too fast for something so simple. But as I turned away, something shifted. It wasn't just a party. It was the start of something that would make this summer the one that would split my life in two, before and after. The last bell of junior year hadn't just ended school, it had started everything else. Chapter 2. The heat of beginning. The days that followed blurred together long stretches of heat, buzzing cicadas, the hum of fans that never quite cooled the air. Summer in Maplewood always felt endless, like time slowed down just to watch you sweat. I started my job at the diner again. Same uniform, same cracked vinyl booths, same regulars who ordered the same breakfast every morning. There was something strangely comforting about the repetition until it wasn't. Every morning, Mrs. Donnelly, my boss, would hand me my notepad and say, "Smile, Alex. You're the face of this place." I tried, but every smile felt like it belonged to someone else. The only difference this summer was the way everything suddenly felt louder: the sound of the bell over the door, the scrape of forks, the laughter from the booth where the football players Saturday. I noticed things I hadn't before. How the sunlight hit the counter at 3 p.m. How my reflection in the napkin dispenser looked older than I remembered. And every night I thought about the lake, about Ethan sitting there sketching the world like he could make it better. Earth to Alex. Maya snapped her fingers in front of my face. She was sitting at the counter, eating fries she hadn't paid for. "Sorry," I said. She grinned. "You've been zoning out a lot lately. Don't tell me the mysterious lake boy got into your head." I didn't reply. That was enough of an answer. Maya smirked. "I knew it." She dipped another fry in ketchup. "You should text him." "I don't have his number." "That's a problem easily solved." She reached into her phone. "I might have some connections." I rolled my eyes. "Don't you dare." But she did. And later that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ethan." "Hey, Maya gave me your number." "Ethan. Hope that's okay." My heart raced a little. I waited a few minutes before replying, trying to sound casual. "Me. Depends. Are you gonna sketch me if I say yes?" "Ethan. Maybe. Depends how still you can sit." I laughed, sitting cross-legged on my bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun lazy circles. That was the beginning. Over the next few weeks, we started talking not just small talk, but real talk, the kind that stretches past midnight. Sometimes he'd text me random thoughts. "Do you think people can actually outgrow a place? What if memories stick to us like dust and we just carry them forever?" It was strange, the way he thought. Deep, a little sad. But it made me feel like he saw the world the way I did, like everything meant something, even the quiet parts. We met at the lake a few more times. Once he brought his sketchbook again, and I brought my mom's old camera. It was film, not digital, clunky and slow, but honest. "You take pictures?" he asked. "Not really. I just like how it feels to stop time for a second." He looked at me for a long moment before saying softly, "Then maybe we're both just trying to keep things from disappearing." That night, as I developed the film in my bathroom, with the light off and the red lamp glowing. I saw it, his face half lit by the setting sun, eyes fixed on the lake. It wasn't perfect. It was grainy, slightly out of focus, but somehow it felt real. Later, lying in bed, I thought about how fragile it all was, how summer was already slipping through our fingers. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I came home to find Mom sitting at the table, bills spread out in front of her. She looked tired, like the world had been sitting on her shoulders all day. "Hey, Mom," I said quietly. She smiled weakly. "How's work?" "Fine," she nodded, flipping through the stack of envelopes. "They're cutting my hours at the clinic," she said finally. "It's just for a while." I didn't know what to say. We'd been through this before, always just scraping by. "Don't worry," I said. "I'll pick up extra shifts." Her eyes softened. "You shouldn't have to," but I already knew I would. Because that's what you do when you grow up too fast. You stop dreaming and start surviving. The next day, I told Ethan I couldn't hang out. He didn't ask why, just said, "Okay, rain check." I thought it would be just one missed evening, but days turned into a week, then 2. When I finally saw him again, he was sitting on the same dock, his notebook beside him, sketching something in the fading light. "You disappeared," he said. "I've been busy." He didn't press, just nodded, tracing the edge of his drawing. But then he looked up at me. "You don't have to pretend everything's okay all the time." It hit me like a wave, not because he said it, but because no one ever had. I sat down beside him. The air smelled like pine and wet earth. We didn't talk after that, just sat there, watching the water ripple under the sunset, both of us quiet in the same way, like two people trying to hold on to something they couldn't name. It was the kind of silence that said more than words ever could. And as the last bit of sunlight faded from the sky, I realized something I hadn't before. Maybe growing up wasn't about running away. Maybe it was about learning to stay even when things hurt. Chapter 3. The Edge of Change. By the middle of July, the whole town seemed to melt in the heat. The air shimmered above the pavement, and the smell of asphalt hung heavy. Everyone moved slower except time. Time raced ahead, as if trying to get summer over with. The diner's old air conditioner gave out that week. Customers complained. Mrs. Donnelly just fanned herself with the menu and muttered, "Welcome to small-town hell." I didn't mind the heat so much anymore. I was used to discomfort. Ethan started coming to the diner sometimes, never with friends, always alone. He'd take the booth by the window, order black coffee and pie, and sketch while I worked. We didn't talk much during my shift, but every time I looked up and caught him watching me, I felt something flicker inside my chest. After closing one night, he waited outside by the parking lot. The streetlights buzzed, moths circling the yellow glow. "Want a walk?" he asked. I hesitated, glancing back at the diner. The neon sign flickered like it was tired to. "Sure." We walked down Main Street in silence. The stores were dark, the world asleep except for us. His hand brushed mine once, accidentally. Neither of us pulled away. "You ever think about leaving this place?" he asked quietly. "All the time." "What stops you?" I kicked a pebble along the sidewalk. "Money, my mom, fear." He nodded like he understood. "Sometimes I think fear's the only real reason anyone stays anywhere." We stopped by the old train tracks that cut through the edge of town. The metal gleamed faintly in the moonlight. "My dad used to work here," Ethan said, "before he left." "Left?" he shrugged. "One day, he packed a bag and drove west. Said he needed space. Never came back. I didn't know what to say. The ache in his voice sounded too familiar. My mom still keeps his tools in the garage, he continued, like he's gonna walk in any minute and pick up where he left off. But he won't. I wanted to reach out, to say something, anything, but all that came out was, "I'm sorry." He looked at me and smiled faintly. "Don't be. It taught me something." "What?" "That people don't always leave because they stop loving you. Sometimes they leave because they can't love themselves here." His words hung in the air long after we'd said good night. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how both of us were waiting him for his dad to return, me for my life to start, and maybe both of us were afraid that neither would ever happen. The next weekend, Maya decided to drag me to another party for my social well-being, she claimed. It was at Tyler's parents' cabin near the woods. Everyone was there, the football guys, the cheerleaders, even Mr. I'm too cool for everything. Ethan Cole, though he stayed on the porch sketching again. Maya handed me a drink I didn't ask for. "Try to have fun for once, is not." I smiled weakly and took a sip. It burned going down. An hour later, the music was shaking the floorboards. People were dancing, laughing, screaming lyrics to songs they barely knew. I felt dizzy, not drunk, just overwhelmed, the kind of dizzy that comes from realizing you don't belong somewhere. I slipped outside. The night was cooler, quieter. Crickets sang in the dark. Ethan was sitting on the steps, smoke curling from a cigarette between his fingers. "Thought you didn't smoke," I said. He smiled without looking at me. "I don't. It's just for the aesthetic." I sat beside him. We didn't speak for a while. The stars above us looked like holes poked through the sky. "You don't like parties either," he said finally. "Not really." "Why'd you come?" "Because Maya wanted me to." He nodded. "You always do what people want?" I bristled a little. "No, could have fooled me." I turned to him, ready to argue, but his tone wasn't mocking. It was curious, almost gentle. He met my eyes, and for a moment it felt like the whole world had gone still. "Maybe you should start doing what you want," he said softly. And before I could respond, he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't like in the movies, no fireworks, no background music, just the sound of my heartbeat and the faint chirp of crickets. His lips were soft, hesitant, but real. When he pulled away, I didn't say anything. Neither did he. We just sat there, two teenagers on a creaking porch, pretending we weren't both falling into something we didn't understand. The next morning, I woke up with the world spinning in a different direction. The air smelled like summer rain. Maya texted me a dozen messages about the party gossip, drama, who hooked up with who. I ignored them all. Instead, I found myself walking toward the lake again. Ethan was already there, sitting by the water with his sketchbook. When he saw me, he smiled, not the polite kind, but the kind that makes your stomach twist. We didn't talk about the kiss, not once, but it changed everything anyway. He started showing me his drawings, people, places, moments. Each one looked like it was breathing. "You're really good," I said one afternoon. He shrugged. "It's just what I do when I can't say things out loud." I understood that better than he knew. That night, after I got home, Mom was waiting for me in the kitchen. The bills were still there, same as always. "You've been out a lot lately," she said. "Just with friends." She looked at me carefully. "You're growing up, I guess. Just don't grow up too fast, okay?" I smiled faintly, but inside I knew it was already too late, because the summer wasn't just changing the weather anymore. It was changing me. Chapter 4. The Storm Before Everything. The next few weeks moved like a slow song, the kind that wraps itself around you until you realize it's over. The heat deepened, pressing down like a hand on the back of your neck. Days at the diner blurred into one another. The same hum of conversation, the same smell of burnt coffee. But beneath the routine, something new had begun. A quiet pulse that beat in rhythm with Ethan's name. We saw each other almost every evening now. Sometimes by the lake, sometimes just walking nowhere in particular. He'd carry his sketchbook, and I'd bring the camera. We didn't talk much about what we were, maybe because naming it would make it fragile. One night he said, "Do you ever think about the future?" "All the time," I said. "But every time I do, it feels like I'm watching a movie that skips halfway through." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, like you can see the beginning and the middle, but the end's just static." We sat there for a while staring at the lake's surface, the reflection of the moon trembling like a secret. Then came the storm. It started on a Thursday, the kind of day that feels wrong from the beginning. The sky was too still, the air too thick. By afternoon, the clouds had swallowed the Sunday. At the diner, the power flickered twice before going out. The neon signs sputtered and died, and rain began to lash against the windows in sharp bursts. "Guess that's our cue," Mrs. Donnelly said, wiping her hands on a towel. "Go home before you get stranded." I grabbed my backpack and ran through the rain. My sneakers slapped against the puddles, and thunder cracked open the sky. When I reached home, Mom wasn't there. Probably stuck at work, but a single note sat on the table. "Overtime shift. Don't wait up. Love you." The lights flickered again, and I sat there in the dark kitchen, listening to the rain hammer the roof. My phone buzzed. "Ethan, you okay?" "Me? Yeah. Power's out here." "You?" "Ethan. Same. Come to the lake. It's insane right now." "Me? Are you serious? You'll get struck by lightning." "Ethan, worth it." I stared at the screen for a moment, then grabbed my jacket. The storm had turned the world into something else wild, alive. The trees bent in the wind, and the rain came down like sheets of glass. By the time I reached the lake, my clothes were soaked through. He was there, of course, standing on the dock, his hair plastered to his forehead, lightning flashing behind him. "You're insane!" I shouted over the thunder. He grinned. "You came? Les, say we'll mine 8. I don't know what it was, the storm, the way his laugh cut through the noise, the electricity in the air, but something inside me cracked open. We stood there, two drenched, shaking idiots, and when he took my hand, it felt like touching the sky. The storm roared around us, but it didn't matter. For that one moment, we weren't afraid of anything, not the future, not the past, not the small town that had built fences around us. He leaned in and kissed me again, harder this time, rain between our mouths, the wind howling through the trees. When we finally pulled apart, the dock creaked beneath our feet. I couldn't tell if I was crying or if it was just the rain. "This doesn't feel real," I whispered. "Maybe that's how you know it is," he said. And then the sky broke open. A flash, a crack, and a bolt hit somewhere near the far end of the lake. The thunder that followed shook the ground. "Come on!" I yelled, grabbing his arm. We ran toward the trees, slipping through the mud, laughing and breathless. By the time we reached the edge of the woods, both of us were soaked, trembling, and alive. Ethan dropped to the ground, lying back in the wet grass, chest heaving with laughter. "I think that was the best night of my life," he said between breaths. I lay down beside him. The rain had softened into a drizzle. "You're impossible." "Is 8-9. He turned his head toward me, his eyes bright even in the dark. You love that about me. And maybe I did. The next morning, the storm had passed. Everything smelled clean, like the world had been washed and hung out to dry. But something in me had shifted. I went to work like nothing happened, but all day I kept replaying it, the storm, the kiss, the way he'd said, "You love that about me." That night, I found him at the lake again, sketching the remnants of the storm-broken branches, the reflection of clouds drifting across the water. "Do you ever feel like this place keeps us trapped?" he asked suddenly. I frowned. "What do you mean?" He looked out over the water. "Like there's a version of us out there, one that made it out, one that didn't get stuck waiting." I didn't answer right away, because I felt it too, that invisible wall, the sense that everything here was temporary, fragile, fleeting. "You're going to leave, aren't you?" I asked finally. He hesitated, then said, "I think so. When school starts again, I got into an art program in Portland." The words hit like a cold wind. "When were you going to tell me?" I just did. I stared at the lake. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not," he said quietly. "But staying would be worse." The silence that followed was louder than thunder. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about him leaving, about the space he would take with him. For the first time in weeks, the lake didn't feel like freedom. It felt like goodbye waiting to happen. And deep down, I knew this summer, the one that had begun with a party and a sketchbook, was leading to something I wasn't ready to face. The storm hadn't ended. It had just moved inside me. Chapter 5. The distance between us. The days after Ethan told me about Portland felt like standing in sunlight that didn't reach my skin. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. He still came by the diner, still sat in his usual booth, still ordered coffee and cherry pie. But there was something new between us, an invisible wall we both pretended not to see. He'd smile, sketch, ask about my day. I'd laugh in all the right places. But every word tasted like something that wouldn't last. Maya noticed first. "Okay," she said one afternoon, leaning across the counter, her chin in her hand. "What's wrong with you?" "Nothing." "Uh-huh," she smirked. "You've got that look. The I kissed a boy and now he's ruining my emotional stability look." I sighed. "He's leaving." Her face softened. "Oh, Portland?" I said quietly. "An art program." Maya nodded slowly, like she'd expected it all along. "And you didn't tell him how you feel, did you?" I looked away. That's what I thought. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "You know, you can be scared and still be honest. They're not opposites." Maybe she was right. But fear is a funny thing. It doesn't shout, it whispers. And that whisper said, "If you tell him, he'll still leave." So I didn't. A week later, Ethan invited me to his house. It was small, tucked behind a row of overgrown hedges on the edge of town. The paint was peeling, and a tire swing hung crooked from a tree that had probably been planted before either of us were born. Inside, it smelled like turpentine and rain. His sketches covered every wall, people, trees, the diner, even the lake. "You drew all these?" I asked, running my fingers over one taped to the wall. It was me, sitting on the dock, hair blown by the wind. He shrugged. "Couldn't help it." For a moment, neither of us said anything. The silence felt like standing on a cliff, thrilling and terrifying at once. Then he said quietly, "I don't want to go and leave everything behind." I turned to him. "Then don't." He smiled, small and sad. "It's not that simple." I wanted to tell him that I wasn't something to leave behind, that what we had mattered, but the words tangled somewhere in my chest, and by the time I found them, he'd already looked away. Later that night, we walked back to the lake. It was late. The air smelled like damp earth and wood smoke. The water shimmered faintly under the stars. "Promise me something," Ethan said, skipping a stone across the surface. "What?" "Promise you'll do something big someday." I laughed. "That's vague." "I mean it," he said. "Don't get stuck here. Don't let this town decide who you are." "And what about you?" He smiled faintly. "I think I already decided." We sat in silence for a while. Then he said something that stuck to me like a song you can't forget. "Maybe growing up is just learning how to say goodbye without breaking." I didn't reply, because I didn't believe him. The next morning, the diner felt emptier than usual. A group of tourists came through, loud and sunburnt, asking for directions to the lake. I smiled, pointed, and poured coffee until my hands ached. After my shift, I walked home under the weight of a sunset that felt too heavy. The light turned everything gold: the road, the houses, even the power lines humming above. When I got home, Mom was sitting on the porch. "You look tired," she said. "I am." She nodded. "Summer does that. It promises you everything and then leaves before you're ready." I sat beside her, watching the sky bleed from orange to violet. "You okay?" she asked. "I think so," I lied. She smiled gently. "You'll figure it out. You always do." That night, Ethan texted me. "Ethan, leaving for Portland in 2 weeks. Ethan, want to come with me to the fair tomorrow? Last one before I go." The fair. The same one I used to go to with Mom when I was a kid, back when everything felt infinite. "Me? Sure." The fairground smelled like popcorn and dust. Strings of lights hung over the rides, glowing like 1,000 small suns. Ethan won me a stuffed bear at the ring toss, and we rode the Ferris wheel until the world below turned into a blur of color and noise. Halfway to the top, he looked at me. "I'm scared," he said. "Of what?" "Of everything. Of leaving, of staying, of not being who I think I am." I didn't think. I just took his hand. The wind lifted our hair, and the world stretched out below us, our whole town, small and ordinary and heartbreakingly beautiful. "I'll miss this," he whispered. "Me too," I said. We didn't kiss that time. We just sat there, hand in hand, watching the lights flicker beneath us, knowing something was ending even as it was still happening. That night, I couldn't sleep. The fair's music still echoed in my head. The stuffed bear sat on my nightstand, staring at me like it knew something I didn't. Outside, a single firework cracked open the dark sky. I thought about what Ethan said about fear, about leaving, about the versions of ourselves waiting somewhere beyond this town. And for the first time, I wondered if growing up wasn't about holding on. Maybe it was about learning when to let go. Chapter 6. The night before goodbye. 2 weeks. That's all that was left. It should have felt like enough time. But each day slid away faster than the last, like sand slipping through my fingers. Every sunrise felt sharper, every sunset heavier. Even the air seemed to carry a countdown. Ethan kept pretending it was fine. He joked, smiled, drew more than ever, sketching everything as if he could trap the world inside paper before he left it behind. But I could see the way his eyes lingered a little too long on everything. The lake, the diner, me. We were living inside a slow goodbye. One afternoon, I found him sitting under the big oak near the train tracks. His sketchbook was open on his lap, his pencil still moving even though his hand looked tired. "What are you drawing?" I asked. He tilted the page toward me. It was the town, the diner, the tracks, the water tower, the street where we first met. Except it wasn't exactly real. The proportions were off, the sky took up half the page, and everything seemed to be dissolving at the edges. "It's Maplewood," he said softly. "The way it feels, not the way it looks. It's beautiful." He smiled faintly. "So are you." I felt heat rise to my cheeks, and before I could say anything, he looked away, flipping the page. "Sorry, just felt true." He drew again, slower this time, his hand trembling slightly. Then he said, "I'm scared I'll forget." "Forget what?" "This," he said. "All of it. You, the lake, the way summer smells right before it rains, the sound of your laugh." My throat tightened. "Then don't." He shook his head. "Memory doesn't work like that." I didn't know what to say, so I sat beside him and watched him draw, both of us pretending not to hear the train horn echoing in the distance. That night, Maya and I sat on her roof, eating ice cream straight from the tub. She stared at me for a long time before saying, "You're in love with him?" I froze. "No, Alex?" I sighed. "Yeah," she nodded, not surprised. "Then tell him." "He's leaving, Maya." "So what? Tell him anyway." "What's the point?" "The point is, you'll regret it if you don't." I stared at the stars. "Maybe I already do." She handed me the spoon. "Then fix it." The next day, Ethan showed up at the diner near closing. The lights buzzed softly, the place half empty. "Walk with me?" he asked. We ended up at the lake again. It was quiet, the air cool and heavy with the smell of rain. The water was still, dark, reflecting the first few stars that had slipped out of the sky. Ethan set his sketchbook on the dock and said, "I think I'm leaving tomorrow instead of Friday." I looked up sharply. "Tomorrow?" He nodded. "They moved orientation. My mom wants to get an early start." "Tomorrow." The word hit like a stone. "Oh, I wanted to tell you sooner," he said quickly. It's fine." My voice cracked on the word. "Alex." He stepped closer, but I pulled away. "You're just going to leave, like it's nothing." "It's not nothing." Then why does it feel like it?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Because I don't know how to stay and still be the person I want to be. Something inside me broke then. Maybe the person you want to be doesn't have to leave everything behind," I said quietly. "I'm not leaving everything." "Yes, you are." The silence after that was unbearable. The lake lapped softly against the dock, and somewhere in the trees a cricket sang like it didn't know anything was ending. Finally, he whispered, "I'll miss you." I wanted to tell him that I loved him, that he had changed me, that no one had ever seen me the way he did. But the words stuck, sharp and heavy, somewhere deep in my chest. So I said nothing. He stepped forward and pulled me into a hug. I buried my face in his shoulder, breathing in the smell of paint and rain. "Goodbye, Alex," he said softly. "Goodbye." And then he was gone. That night, I didn't sleep. The house was too quiet. My heart felt too loud. Around 2 a.m., I grabbed my hoodie and ran. The road to the lake glowed silver under the moonlight. I didn't know what I was doing, just that I couldn't let the story end like that. When I reached the water, the air was still. His sketchbook was sitting on the dock, half soaked from the night air. I opened it. The last page was a drawing of me, not smiling, just me. Hair tangled, eyes looking straight ahead like I was about to say something important. Underneath it, A single line. Some people become your home even when they're just passing through. I sat down on the dock and let myself cry. Not the quiet kind. The kind that comes from somewhere ancient inside you, grief and love tangled together. The stars blurred, the world shimmered, and for the first time all summer, I didn't try to hold it in, because Maya was right, because Ethan was right, because growing up wasn't about pretending you were okay. It was about letting yourself feel everything, even when it hurt. When dawn came, the lake looked new again. The world smelled like beginning. Ethan was gone. But somehow, I wasn't empty. Somehow, I felt alive. Chapter 7. After the leaving. The morning after he left, Maplewood felt different, quieter, like the world had been holding its breath and was now too afraid to exhale. The sunlight streamed through my window the same way it always did, landing on the same cracks in the same floorboards, but everything inside me had changed shape. The space where Ethan used to be wasn't empty. It was echoing. Downstairs, Mom was already making coffee. She looked up when I came into the kitchen. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep." "He's in day." She poured me a cup. "You okay?" I thought about lying, but what was the point? "Not really." She nodded, sliding the mug toward me. "Good. Means you cared." It wasn't the kind of comfort I expected, but it helped anyway. We sat there in silence, the kind that fills a house when two people understand something without saying it. The diner felt heavier that day, too. The bell above the door still chimed when people came in, but I kept looking up expecting to see him walk through sketchbook under his arm, eyes crinkled in that half-smile he always wore. But the booth by the window stayed empty. "Table 4's yours," Mrs. Donnelly called, breaking my trance. I grabbed the coffee pot and went through the motions. Smile, pour, write, repeat. But my hands felt slower, my chest tighter. Every time the door opened, I turned, and every time it was someone else. At closing, Maya showed up. She didn't say anything, just sat at the counter and waited until the last customer left. When the lights dimmed and the neon sign outside buzzed faintly in the dark, she finally said, "So, how bad is it?" I sighed. "On a scale of 1 to dying inside?" She grinned sadly. "That bad, huh?" "Worse." She reached over and flicked my forehead lightly. "Then we're doing ice cream therapy. My treat." "Esdo." I laughed, the first real laugh in days, and for a moment I remembered that maybe heartbreak didn't mean something was over. Maybe it meant it mattered. Later that night, we sat by the lake again. The air was cooler now, the first hints of fall slipping in under summer's last breath. The surface of the water was glassy and still. I watched the reflection of the stars ripple every time I threw a pebble. "Think he'll ever come back?" Maya asked quietly. "I don't know. Would you want him to?" I hesitated. "Yeah," I said finally, "but not because I need him to." She smiled. "That's new." I smiled too. "Yeah, I guess it is." It hissed. We stayed there until the moon was high and the air smelled like pine and memory. The following week, I found a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name, Alex, written in the crooked, careful handwriting I'd memorized. My heart raced as I tore it open. "Dear Alex, I wasn't sure if I should write this. You always said words can make things worse, but I think silence can too. The truth is, leaving felt wrong the second the train started moving. It wasn't just the town I saw disappearing outside the window. It was you. You made Maplewood mean something. You made me see that staying doesn't always mean being stuck. I don't know what will happen next. Maybe we'll never see each other again. But if we do, I hope it's because we both became the people we were trying to find this summer. Thank you for being my home for a little while. Ethan. I read it 3 times, tracing each word with my fingers. The paper smelled faintly like graphite and rain. I didn't cry this time. I smiled, because somehow the ache in my chest didn't feel like loss anymore. It felt like proof. A few days later, I started taking photos again, not of people this time, but of things. The diner sign flickering against the dusk, the old tracks rusting in the weeds, the lake catching fire under the sunset. Every picture felt like a way of saying, I was here. This mattered. I bought a notebook, too plain, spiral-bound, with a cover the color of storm clouds. On the first page, I wrote, "Summer is what teaches you that endings are just beginnings with different names." I didn't know if it was true yet, but I wanted it to be. By the time school started again, I was different. People noticed Maya, my teachers, even Mrs. Donnelly, who called me less grumpy than usual. It wasn't that everything got better overnight. I still missed him. I still felt the emptiness when I passed the lake or the booth where he used to sit. But it didn't hurt in the same way. It wasn't sharp anymore. It was soft, like a scar that didn't ache when it rained. On the first cold morning of September, I walked past the tracks where Ethan and I had stood that night in the storm. The sky was pale blue, streaked with thin clouds. I stood there for a long time, listening to the wind, and for the first time since he left, I didn't feel like half of something. I felt whole. Because sometimes, growing up isn't about finding someone to stay. It's about learning how to stay with yourself. And for the first time, I finally could. Chapter 8. The Summer That Stayed. By October, the leaves had started to turn. The heat that once pressed down on Maplewood had softened into crisp mornings and slow sunsets. The air smelled like apples and dry grass. And the lake, our lake, had gone still again, mirroring the sky like it was remembering summer. Life moved forward, as it always does. School began. The halls filled with familiar faces, same routine, same gossip. But I wasn't the same person walking through them. It wasn't that I'd stopped caring about what people thought. It was that I finally understood that what they thought didn't define me. Maya said I had a glow-up of the soul. I told her that sounded like a bad self-help book. She hit me with a pencil. We laughed a lot that day. In English class, we were told to write an essay about a moment that changed you. Most people wrote about sports games, family vacations, or that time the cafeteria microwave caught fire. I wrote about the summer, about the storm, about the boy who taught me how to see beauty in things that don't last. I didn't use his name. I didn't have to. My teacher called it raw and honest. I called it a promise to myself. One afternoon, I went back to the diner to pick up an extra shift. Mrs. Donnelly was in the back arguing with a supplier, so I wiped down the counter humming to myself. The bell above the door jingled, and for half a second just half my heart jumped, expecting him. It wasn't Ethan, just an older man with tired eyes ordering coffee to go. But when I poured it, I caught my reflection in the window, hair pulled back, smile soft, eyes steadier than before, and for the first time, I realized something. I didn't need him to walk through that door. He'd already left enough of himself behind to stay. That night, Maya and I drove out to the lake one last time before the cold set in. We parked by the old fence and sat on the hood of her car, watching the stars blink into existence. "I still can't believe summer's over," she said, handing me a soda. Yeah, I said quietly. Feels like it never really ended, though. How so? Hey, and 80, Sate. I thought about the storm, the fair, the letter, about the way the world had looked different after he left. Because it changed everything, I said finally. And things that change you don't really end. Maya nodded. That's deep. You've been hanging around too many artists. I laughed. Maybe. We sat there until the chill got too sharp, then drove home in silence, the headlights cutting through the darkness like a reminder that even when the road bends, it still keeps going. Winter came, then spring, then another summer. Ethan never came back, not that year at least, but every once in a while I'd get a postcard, a sketch of a street corner, a city skyline, a wave crashing against the coast, no return address, no explanation, just one line every time, still drawing. Sometimes I'd smile, sometimes I'd cry, sometimes I'd just pin it above my desk beside my photographs, all the moments that had made me real. The years passed the way years do, quietly at first, then all at once. I graduated, left Maplewood, started college. But every time life got too loud, too heavy, I'd think about the lake, about the way the light hit the water that last morning, about how Ethan once said, maybe growing up is learning how to say goodbye without breaking. He was wrong, though. You don't grow up by learning not to break. You grow up by breaking and realizing you can still heal after. One summer years later, I drove back to Maplewood. The town looked smaller. The diner was still there, though the neon sign had been replaced. Mrs. Donnelly had retired. The lake was quieter than I remembered, the dock half rotted, the trees taller. I sat there for hours, camera in hand, waiting for the light to change. When I finally stood up to leave, I noticed something half buried near the edge of the dock, a small, weathered sketchbook. The pages were swollen with age, the pencil lines faint, but the first drawing I saw was unmistakable. Me, sitting on the dock. Beneath it, a note in his handwriting. If you're reading this, it means you stayed. I smiled. The air smelled like summer again, pine, water, sky, and for the first time, I understood. He didn't just leave pieces of himself behind. He left me the courage to find mine. I sat there until the stars came out, the world quiet around me. Then I whispered into the night, "Thank you, Ethan." A breeze rippled across the water, soft, warm, endless, and for a moment I swore I heard his voice echo back.